Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Gentlemen, I can't talk. I don't know what's going on. Apparently, I'm not the only. My computer isn't the only thing that needs an update. I need an update. Uh, welcome to another episode of Fighting the Void. And I apologize if you notice any difference in sound or video quality, and especially if it's a downgrade. I apologize. I am on my phone right now because I decided to try to update my computer, and turns out normally 10, 15 minutes is good to do a Windows update. This one apparently is the biggest Windows update since they came out with Windows 10. And it has been going for about a solid 40 minutes. Go figure. What are you going to do? So, well, I guess what you do is you fire up the phone and suck it up and deal with it. But in any case, I am joined today by this young lady who I know only has, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, Amina. Sound good?
Close enough, Amina.
Close enough. Yeah. Amina. Well, you know what? I like that's easier to say. Amina. We'll do that. And if you have been following her on Twitter for a while, you know that Amina has quite the story. She has gone from Muslim to Catholic, from med student to convent to whatever is going on now. And Amina, I was actually going to ask you to come on and talk about your conversion before you went into the convent. But
Right.
as you were getting close, you were like talking about stepping away from social media. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not going to step on that at all. I'm going to respect that, let her do her thing. But as soon as you came back, I was like, no, I got to jump on it. So, and yes, Margot, I have Windows. Mac costs twice as much as Windows. Has a Windows computer, at least. I'm sorry. And I've had a Mac. It's not worth the price increase. So, on that note, so let's just jump right into things. All right. You went from Muslim to Catholic. Now, as we were just discussing before we went live, over on the other side of the Atlantic, that is not as uncommon as some people would think. That's actually happening in droves in some places. However, over here in America, that is not something one hears about every day. So,
Right.
How on earth did this come about? And start wherever you would like.
Okay. So I suppose I could just talk about like the Muslim community as a whole and the ex-Muslim community in America. It doesn't happen all that often, unfortunately, because when people leave the religion, they kind of fall towards the secularism and the flashiness that they see that's been proliferated in the Western world. And so they often fall to the grasps of atheism. And so the beginning part of my conversion was influenced by that. I thought, I've left this religion, that was my life. Now I suppose I should become an agnostic or an atheist. And so I did that for a couple of years, and it was just really dark. I'd gotten to my sophomore year of college. I was about 19 years old. And I said, something has to give way, because there's this great meaning in my life that doesn't exist right now, and it's causing this huge void. And I had everything that people, in society would possibly want, like from the exterior. I came from wealth, I had an educational background, I had a lot of support within my community, but there was just something that was missing, and that was God. And I knew this, so I would go on these periods of just like trying to learn about different world religions, but there was a certain point where I just snapped and I said, I can't find this anywhere, so I'm just going to stop looking because it's hurting me so much spiritually. And so I just stopped. Yeah, and then
now,
during my sophomore year...
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
Now, is this at a point where you would have considered yourself an atheist?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I find interesting. You felt that that it was actually causing you pain spiritually, searching for some sort of truth in some sort of recognized religion, but
Right.
not being able to find it.
Exactly.
I find that interesting. How on earth, um, what was your thought process there? Like being, since you would have called yourself an atheist, what would, what even did you mean? What would you have at least meant if you spoke in those terms then, that this was hurting me spiritually?
Um, just despair. Like I was very nihilistic. I said there's no point in life. I was apathetic towards everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
I'm hearing a little echo. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's that's an effect of the fact that I'm on my stinking phone.
Okay. No worries.
And I don't, unfortunately, I don't have a solution ready to hand. Although it looks like my PC is done updating, so we'll go ahead and we'll talk through this. And if I can get that thing up and running while we're talking here, then we'll switch to that, and I'll plug my headphones in, and we won't have that problem.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. But yeah, I was really falling into despair, and the way I would have described it was life was meaningless, you know. Um, I had high hopes and aspirations of wanting to go into medicine, but I had even said at that point, there's no purpose of this. Like, why would I even chase after this if I have no purpose of even living? So, I would do reckless things. Like, I would walk down the street because I was just so angry with life. And I wouldn't care. Like, if some car was speeding towards me, I'd be like, if this car just hits me, it doesn't really matter because there's no cause for my existence. It was really sad. Yeah.
Huh. I find again, I find it interesting because you are actually looking at this kind of square on, because I'm sure most atheists aren't going to be looking at, aren't going to necessarily admit that to themselves.
Right.
They're gonna they're gonna go ahead and jump into the whole secular lifestyle, basically try to go after uh, pleasure, go after distraction, all of that. But you were actually kind of willing to look at the consequences of, if atheism is accurate, you're willing to look at the consequences of what that means, and that's impressive to me.
Right. From that darkness, because God is so good and omnibenevolent, I was able to eventually see light where it said, despite all of this, but God, if you do exist, carry me out of this. And so it was like this short little prayer, this short little ejaculation. But after that, I began reading into philosophy, and from there, like, it was very sudden, very quick. I started with the ancient Greeks with Plato's dialogues, and then from there going to Aristotle, and then from there going to Catholic classics with Aquinas, and it just all made sense. And I was like, this is all true. And from there, you can't do anything or want to do anything if you're being completely honest with yourself, but want to convert. So it was very rapid for me.
Really? So you jumped in quickly to Aquinas.
Right.
I find that interesting. Again, I find that very interesting. So there was there. Hold on. I'm echoing myself. Okay, I'm going to get out of the phone here a minute. Sorry, everybody. As Margot will say, low tech. Just a moment. Okay, now I just got to shut this off my phone. There we go. All right. Now, no echoes, and this will be much better, and I can actually see the chat. So this is good. All right. So, there was nothing like, but was there any, like, one particular thing, one particular thought, one particular event that all of a sudden got you? Like, okay, this is definitely it, not
not Islam, not atheism. It's obviously this.
Yeah, and some people are going to laugh at this, but that final aha moment was reading the Aristotelian explanation for the existence of God,
No kidding.
which you could find in Aristotle's Metaphysics, chapter 6. When you read it, you say God exists. And because the Catholic faith was very Aristotelian, that jump was very sudden for me. I could make that metaphysical connect from the ancient Greeks to the Catholic faith.
Okay, so you again, this is not the typical path, but this is why I dig this so much, because this is right along the same kind of lines that my own. This is similar lines that my own conversion traveled.
Right.
Yeah, I'm fairly philosophically minded, and Aristotle's prime mover argument was extremely interesting to me because it's about as far as reason can get you, but
right.
it is also remarkably far. It does get you to at least some version of monotheism, and but that is all it gets you. It gets you to, okay, there's definitely a God somewhere. You can't have an infinite materialistic regress. And if people are interested in the whole concept of infinite regress, I did do a thing on that a while back. You can go searching through the channel feed and find that. It was just me kind of riffing on it and going very, very in depth into it. But so still, prime mover isn't exactly the Christian God, and the Christian God and Christianity. Well, there's a lot of different religions that would claim the sole mantle of Christianity. So, first, how did you get from prime mover to the Christian God?
Right. I needed the prime mover argument to understand the concept of the Trinity, and that's not going to make sense to a lot of people, but it makes sense if you have done apologetic work with Muslims. One of the first arguments they have against the Christian faith is
the Trinity. They consider it
exactly.
Yeah, right.
Really
they consider it like they actually consider it paganism or some such, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they consider it polytheism. It's just very funny. But I was at that point too. And so I needed metaphysics to try and understand the concept of the Trinity. And why would I try and attempt to understand the concept of the Trinity? It's because when you look at Christ as an example, you can't see anything but love. You can't see anything but truth. And that was like the complete antithesis to what I was raised in, you know? And I was attracted to that, but I could never get to that point where I'd be like, okay, well, this is a religion I want to leap into, because I had that difficulty with the philosophy of it and the metaphysics. Okay.
So, so what was it? What was it that made it? I don't know if I would made it acceptable, palatable, because I don't want to say makes sense, because, well, Trinity can't fully wrap our heads around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I describe this in a way that can even make sense to myself? It's really hard because it is even really difficult metaphysics. But when you look at the final part of the prime mover argument, you're able to draw the attributes of God: him being immaterial, him having no privations, him being omnibenevolent and omnipotent and omniscient. And you get to that point and you're like, okay, and if this is the case, he also cannot be three. And then you look at the Catholic faith, which is able to accept this Aristotelian argument and describes it with the Trinity, and it fits that framework.
Okay.
And you can't understand this with Aquinas as well, and St. John Chrysostom, who also did a lot of apologetics with Muslims. And I was able to make that connection.
Okay. See, now I've got to go read some St. John Chrysostom, because I think I've read a couple of excerpts here and there back in the day, but it's been a minute.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to have to get into his writings a little bit more. And so, okay. So you got to a point where you were able to find a Ugh, I can't talk tonight. What's going on? Clearly, it's been too long since I've had any whiskey. I gave up alcohol for Lent, so I've got a couple of weeks yet. It'll be rough until then, folks. I'm sorry, but anyway, we're going to make the best of this situation and go. So you found a metaphysical argument that made sense, that made the Trinity acceptable to you. Okay, so that's cool. So were you ever, shall we say, tempted? I don't know if tempted is the right word, but we'll use it. Were you ever tempted to go to any of the other varieties of Christianity out there, some form of Protestantism, like some high church Lutherans, or even over to the Orthodox side of things?
I dabbled a little bit in like Protestantism when I was like 17 or 18, but I could just never make the jump because there was just so much meaning lacking. And the meaning was lacking because they had gutted half of the tradition that we have in the church today. Like, how could you get rid of that? And I was raised in this faith where we had preserved the tradition. I mean, it had gotten so literal where if people made changes to the Quran, there'd be so much anger that would be caused by it. And so I was raised in tradition, and then, I couldn't go to Protestantism because they had gotten rid of all of that. They had gotten rid of beauty and all the beautiful rituals. I was like, there's something missing there. I wasn't attracted to it like at all.
So So again, this is interesting. Being Muslim made it easier for you to become Catholic than anything else in particular,
right?
Because of the value on certain on a certain strict structured liturgy, of the value that it places on things like actually honoring the past and whatnot. I think that's fascinating. Now, I want to take a quick step back, and that is, did you know when you were in kind of your atheist phase? They did. Okay. Now, I'm kind of curious, if you're willing to talk about it. If not, just feel free to shut me down. How did they deal with that? Because you shared on Twitter that they didn't care for you becoming Catholic very much.
Do you mean my family?
Yes.
Or
in general, yes.
Or just people around me?
Your family in particular, but
okay. I was very, very, very private with my spiritual life. I think on one occasion I had maybe mentioned out of anger that like I was atheist, and the response I had gotten was, "Don't you ever talk about that ever again." And that was the extent of it. Never brought it up again. Never talked about spiritual matters again. And for those who don't know, and I don't know if you know this, Ginger, but for the first 2 years of my conversion into the faith, I lived as a closeted convert, in that my family didn't know about my conversion.
Okay, I did not know that, although I'll be honest, I'm not terribly surprised, just given the kind of reaction that I would expect. Because one thing that I actually give Muslims as a whole kind of credit for is they've got a good long-term memory as a collective, and well, that collective memory is obviously going to remember the Crusades, and unfortunately, it's not going to go far enough back to remember that. Well, you started it. but that's how that goes. And I also kind of know how it goes with how the memory of that goes and carries forth today. we'll just say that.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting that comes up, because I was just talking to my kids today about the fact that Islam in general does have a long-term memory. One of the only groups of people that actually do have a long-term memory. And the example I was using was the siege at Vienna, and when the winged hussars came down and broke the siege, and how that was, oddly enough, the anniversary of that was 9/11, when they attacked the World Trade Center. I was like, yeah, that wasn't an accident, kids. They remember things like this, and they hold a grudge. But in any case, so when you finally, so you were a closeted convert for
Right.
2 years, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and ask the obvious question. What was that like?
It was really hard, because I had found the cause of my joy, happiness, and even my existence, and I couldn't share it to those who I loved the most around me. Like, I wanted
Right.
them to also profit from it and to heal with it.
Mhm.
And it was terribly difficult not being able to share it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you have any friends or anything outside of your family that you were able to talk about?
Maybe like in school, 1 or 2, which is tough. But the vast majority of friends I did make was like at my parish.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hope at least that they were pretty supportive of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Good. Now, what made you finally decide to kind of come out into the open, step out of the closet?
It was 2 weeks before I'd entered into the convent.
Oh, wow.
Which isn't the best.
Oh, geez, you really, wow, you really hit him with a double whammy. My
It was
goodness.
hard, yeah.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get right into the convent then, because I know you were, yeah, I mean, you shared a lot about that whole discernment and everything to go into the convent on Twitter, like you
Right.
would. So, okay, actually, this puts a whole new interesting wrinkle on what you were sharing, because I remember you saying that you would go away for like weekends and stuff over to the convent, different convents even, and spend some time with the sisters. So you were doing all of that kind of kind of secretive.
Right. It was a secret. Yeah, it was tough.
I can well imagine. Wow. How much? I guess. How much did you share with the sisters and everything when you were there? How much did they know about your situation?
With the sisters I did enter with, I shared everything, but yeah, I mean, I tend to be like a very private person, so for those that I didn't have to share it with, I just didn't, because I've never been one to really want to stand out.
Right. Well, hey, yeah, you found all kinds of ways to stand out, though, oddly enough.
I know, it's paradoxical. It's like you don't want something to happen, it ends up happening anyways.
Well, it's God picks the most unlikely people sometimes to be the ones who stick out.
Right.
It usually isn't the obvious ones who wind up being the ones that everybody notices going through life. Sometimes it's the one who actually would rather even not be noticed.
Right, exactly.
But in any case, so you hit them with this. You discerned going into this one convent, and it was the Carmelites. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, who doesn't love the Carmelites? I mean,
I know.
Really, they for those who don't know, and there may be some in the chat who don't, go check out the Carmelite order. It's got some of the biggest, most important saints in the entire Catholic Church. Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, Saint John of the Cross. If you don't know these names, check them out. Trust me, they're some of the heaviest hitters that we've got.
Right.
And some of the densest, some of the most interesting. And Saint Teresa of Avila has some of my favorite saint quotes of all time, actually.
Right.
I actually even got to use one at work a few years ago. The quick side story. Somebody brought in a this ridiculous chocolate cake at work one time, and it was like, it was the thing was like over half a foot tall, and just many layers, and all of them chocolate. And they knowing that I'm a fairly religious individual, was like, hey, you should probably say grace or something, shouldn't you? And of course, they're kind of mocking. I'm like, well, I have a solution to this. And Saint Teresa of Avila, as it turns out, was probably one of the first people in Europe to actually try chocolate after it was brought over from the New World. Mm. And her response is recorded as, God and chocolate is better than just God. like yes, so I just use that.
You'd be surprised to hear it. Nuns have really huge sweet tooths. Like, it was our favorite thing in the world. We would find an excuse, like on feast days, to bring out all the desserts. It was the best thing.
And for people who don't know, we have tons of feast days, so there's all kinds of excuses.
Exactly.
We literally invented the carnival. Not a joke, actually. We did, in fact, invent the carnival. It's actually the name actually comes from the Latin word carne for meat, because before, like, a feast day, before Lent or what have you, there would be back in the day before Lent, there was no meat whatsoever. Like, none. Not just on Fridays, but from Ash Wednesday to Easter, no meat. And so they would have a big party, a big festival, big carnival to get rid of all their carne the day on what we now call Fat Tuesday.
Right.
So that way it wouldn't spoil and everything. So anyway, moving along. Mr. Large Male. No, I'm not speaking with a laying nun. I'm actually speaking with a former nun. And we're going to get into that here before too long. But, okay, so I guess first, let's talk a little bit more about what made you kind of, well, for one, why were you looking at joining a convent in the first place? Let's do that.
I had a really great love for God and yearning for him. Mm-hmm. And because he had given me everything and all my happiness through the faith, I thought it right to give him an earnest try with understanding, mm-hmm. if I had a religious calling or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's a common enough thing for new converts to explore that. Definitely. Mm-hmm. I know my brother, when he converted, he considered exploring the priesthood for a little bit. That didn't last terribly long, but it was there. And I'd be a liar if I said the thought didn't cross my mind too, when I was in my whole conversion process. Mm-hmm. So, Carmelites in particular. Again, I mean, it's a particular order. For those who don't know, we've got lots of different religious orders. One day, maybe I'll do an episode just going in depth on some of them. But what in particular drew you to the Carmelites?
What in particular? I have visited a lot of different orders, and in the faith, I don't know if everybody knows this, we have two predominant forms of the Mass that exist in mm-hmm. the Western world. We have, the extraordinary form of the Latin Mass, of the Roman Rite of the Mass, and then we have the ordinary form. And I was attracted to the extraordinary form,
I'm
or
not
more
surprised.
commonly known as the traditional Latin Mass.
Yep.
And because I was attracted to that, I was limited to about like 5 different orders in the entire
Okay.
United States
Oh, wow.
that could provide the Latin Mass. And there wasn't very many communities. And I mean, they're growing now, but there really isn't much because of the quelling of the Latin Mass after Vatican II. But because I had been looking for that, I was looking predominantly at either the Benedictines or the Carmelites.
Okay.
And the Benedictines just didn't fit with my own spirituality because they spend most of their life in work. And I considered myself to have more of a contemplative spirituality. I needed mental prayer. And that's more attuned to the Carmelite way of life. So it was very easy for me.
Okay.
I didn't have many orders to choose from. So I was like, this is traditional Latin Mass. This is Carmelite. I like this. So let's go there. And then I visited, loved all the sisters, and yeah.
Well, fair enough. And yes, obviously, if you're thinking contemplative, Carmelite versus Benedictine, yeah, it's an easy choice.
Right.
I know a handful of Benedictines down in Chicago, and they're great. I love them. Going on the occasions when I get to go visit there, it's always a good time.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. The kids enjoy it. It's very awesome. But in any case, it's so. I do recall also you sharing that whenever you did visit the nuns, whichever order it was a very peaceful experience. Now, especially looking back, would you say it was more because you were in the presence of the nuns at a convent, or because you were actually free to live and express your faith openly?
That's a tough question. And I'm 2 weeks out, so I don't know if I could answer
Come
that.
on, you don't have this all sorted out already? What's wrong with you?
No. I think it's something I'll have to sort out through spiritual direction. Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, oh goodness. So you were in the convent for, what was it, about 2 months? Is that about right? Okay,
Yeah.
so obviously it's a short stint. And so what was it? And I know you've shared this, but for the sake of the audience, what was it that made you decide to leave?
So I guess the main factor probably was, I just don't know how to describe it, because you never really truly understand the feeling of it until you enter. And
Understood. Yep.
it was like,
yeah.
It's the fullness of our life and our faith, and contemplatives live the closest to how we live in heaven. So there's nothing missing in that life. Like, it's perfect. But we're not all called to that. And so I just don't know how to describe it, because I felt like there was something that didn't quite sit right with me. And I didn't have words to really put to it. And I've tried to describe it a little bit on my Twitter, but even then it's like, it's kind of vague, doesn't really make sense. And yeah, it's probably another thing that I'm going to have to work on a lot under spiritual direction.
Fair enough. Because yeah, I'm sure it's a bit of a mess, but obviously too, it's better that you figure it out sooner rather than later.
Right.
Because then you get in that whole sense of, it's like, well, I've been here this long, and you can wind up trying to force a calling that may or may not actually be there.
Exactly.
That said, I think it was probably good that you did follow that into that convent, because it's entirely possible. And I actually use this as an example with somebody else, that sometimes God calls you to one thing for a little while because you need that for a little while. It may or may not be your long-term path, but this is a path you need to be on right now.
Exactly.
And yeah. And
Yeah.
I genuinely hope that you, whatever it was you were supposed to get from that you got it.
Yeah.
Now, I guess now, and you had left med school too.
Yeah. It was probably the greatest attachment I had. And it was really hard, like really, really hard to let go. But I said, if God wants this of me, then I'll let go of everything for it.
And
yeah.
the fact you were willing to, the fact that you had gotten into med school, no small task in and of itself, and that you were in there and you were willing to let it go. I have zero doubt that God's definitely got something in mind for you. What, I haven't the foggiest dang idea, but definitely something, because that kind of spirit doesn't get left just laying around idle.
Right.
Now, of course, I'm sure you'll have to figure that out through some serious, hardcore spiritual direction, and that is not something I am qualified for, so we won't be doing that here live on the internet tonight, everybody. Sorry to disappoint. Now, I guess so. What are your plans going forward? I mean, have you thought about, are you going back to med school, or are you going to, maybe try to pursue something else?
I'm going to be spending this year reading, praying, doing domestic duties, and then maybe traveling a little bit and sorting everything out. And then I might end up going back to school, but yeah, I'll have to wait and see for that
We'll
next
see.
year. Yeah.
No, and that is definitely fair enough, because yeah, I'm sure you have got a lot to sort out there,
Right.
which is, again, very cool. So I guess you've seen a lot of stuff online too. Again, you shared an awful lot of your journey online. In fact, I think there's a lot of people in the chat that have probably followed that to one degree or another. Whether approving or not, I have no idea. So how has your Twitter experience been throughout this whole thing?
It's been really crazy, to say the least. There's some people who have been following me since like my catechumen days, which is like 2 to 3 years ago, and they've seen me through everything. And then there's like newer followers who have only known me like after my conversion process. And then, you have people who have only heard of me recently after leaving the convent. So there's people at every single stage who know me to varying degrees. I mean, and I drop like all these facts about myself, and for some people it might be the first time that they're hearing about it. And it's caused like a lot of friction, I would say, on Twitter, but it's also caused a lot of fruits. A lot of fruit has been born from it. Like I read my messages in the DMs, as they say, and people come to me and share how, me just simply sharing my experiences has helped them with the faith. And it's really inspiring, and it's part of the reason why I'm still on here, like despite all the craziness that happens on Twitter.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint of heart, especially if you're delving right into some of the more controversial aspects of life in general.
Right.
I mean, Islam by itself generates a whole heck of a lot of emotion, shall we say. Catholicism by itself generates a whole lot of emotion. You put the two together, and just by nature of things in opposition to one another, you're going to get some emotion.
Right. I mean, you can see some of it in the chat right now.
I am. There looks like there's a lively apologetics discussion going on over there, which I'm just kind of keeping a side eye on a little bit, and that's interesting over there. I say, go for it, Joker. I never thought I'd be rooting for the Joker, but hey.
Right. It makes for some interesting, midday entertainment. I'll look at my messages on Twitter or like my tweets, and then, I'll have a tweet that, might have had 50 likes when I went to bed, and then the next day there was like 100 quote retweets, and it's like a bunch of Muslims like attacking me. And I'm really happy for Twitter's quality filter feature, because without that, my notifications would constantly be ringing. It'd be annoying.
Yeah. I turned my notifications off, actually, or at least I put the whole phone actually on silent, so I can still see the notifications when they come in, but the phone isn't constantly buzzing. The only time that causes a problem is when my wife is like, "Didn't you hear the phone ring when I called?" I'm like, "No." I'm sorry. But, what can you do?
Right.
It's the sacrifices we make. But so gosh, I don't know if you want to answer this or not, but Noah was just curious as to how old you are. I know you've shared your age in the past, but that's up to you.
Oh, do you know my age?
You shared it.
Okay.
So it was a while ago, but I'm pretty sure I could take a pretty good guess.
I'll probably DM you about it, but for everybody else on YouTube world, I'm just gonna say in between the age of 20 and 25. Not gonna get any more specific than
Fair
that.
enough. You can't run for president. You can't rent a car yet, but you can
Exactly.
vote. Fair enough. Okay, so I guess let's we're getting kind of into the home stretch here a little bit. So first off, what would you say the chief differences are between, and you can let's do theologically first, and then we'll do sort of culturally, between Islam and Catholicism.
Theologically, would be like the major one, the rejection of the godly nature of Christ in
Okay.
Islam is the major one, and by extension, not accepting the Trinity. And then, yeah, that's the major one.
I would say
and
so.
then culturally, I would say Islam is more strict in terms of its traditionalism, with like accepting, traditional gendered roles, which,
right.
I mean, some of them aren't rooted in truth, but I'd have to say, like, I give a lot of respect to a lot of their traditional approaches to their culture. And unfortunately, like with the Catholic faith, I don't know what's happened in the last 50 or so years, but it's become a lot looser in those cultural standards and norms, unfortunately.
Considerably so. And that's a thing that's worth a whole other episode in and of itself, is what on earth happened since, and everybody points to Vatican II, and not without reason, but the fact is Vatican II didn't happen in a vacuum either. Things were already kind of, part of the reason it was called is because things were already starting to go off the rails and people kind of noticed it. Obviously that hasn't changed. No, not even a little bit, I'm afraid. But now, one of the things that I find interesting is there's a lot is made of the Muslim respect for Mary, actually. And I find this interesting, and I don't think it's, put it this way, I don't think that it's an accident that Our Lady appeared in Fatima.
Right.
Named after, presumably it's named after the daughter of Muhammad. I don't know that for a fact, but considering what I know of where the Moors were, and that's the name of Muhammad's daughter, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's an accident.
By extension, I would say so. It was named after Princess Oriana, whose name was Fatima, and she was a Moorish princess who ended up marrying a Catholic, and he loved her so much that he named the city after her. But she would have gotten the name from, Muhammad's
I
daughter.
didn't know that. That is
Yeah.
okay. That makes it even cooler to my mind.
Right. She had converted as well, which is amazing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That even makes it less likely that it's an accident. So, okay. So they have a lot of respect for Mary because they, as I understand, Muslims do regard Jesus as a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Just, obviously they don't regard him as the son of God. Otherwise they wouldn't be Muslim.
Right.
And what I find interesting is that I think a lot of Muslims, frankly, have more respect for Mary than a lot of Protestants. So
Right.
I guess what's up with that?
What's up with that was, I got this from Hilaire Belloc. He has a chapter on Mohammedanism, or Islam, and he talks a little bit about how there is a heresy going around, the Nestorian heresy that originated with Nestorius the heretic, that took out the divinity of Christ and
Right.
told the people that this was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually going around in Arabia when Muhammad would have, just started out his religion, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Nestorian priests, because of their poor catechesis, were telling the people, Christ wasn't divine.
Right.
They're Catholic, but they're heretics. And it was unfortunate, but he got that, and, it just translated into Islam, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it is. It is fascinating. There are these strange, interesting parallels
Right.
that are like. I mean, even the regimented prayer multiple times a day. It seems to me to be a mirror of the liturgy of the hours.
Right.
Which I forget how many. Is it 3 or 5 times a day?
The liturgy of the divine office.
No. The amount of times you're supposed to pray towards Mecca.
Oh, the Islamic prayer. It occurs 5 times a day. The Salah. Yeah.
5 times. Thank you.
Yeah.
Which I can't remember how many periods there are in the liturgy of the hours, but I think it's probably at least 5.
It's 7. Yeah.
It's 7. Okay. Okay. I did I did a little bit of it for a while. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, all right, this is one of those things that only takes X amount of time. That's just going to have to go because I already do too many things that are only X amount of time. For those who don't know, there are all kinds of spiritual advice books out there that will say you should totally do this. It's like the best thing ever. It will totally rock your spiritual world. It only takes 10 or 15 minutes a day. Well, you know what? If you do more than a couple of those 10 or 15 minutes a day really start to add up.
Right.
Put it that way. And eventually you got to pick and choose a little bit. Public service announcement. So now we are really getting into the home stretch here. So what resources would you recommend for anyone interested in Catholicism, whether they're coming from Islam or whether they're coming from atheism or wherever? What would be like the things you would recommend somebody get out there and read, or even organizations they should contact if someone would prefer to do that?
I would recommend people. That's tough. Well, first start off with the Gospels, of course. And I really think for a beginner who isn't really inclined towards philosophy to read and start with Edward Feser when trying to digest Aquinas. And I'm sure you've heard of him. You can probably explain him a little bit more.
I actually haven't read Feser at all. He's relatively new to the apologetic scene, at least to me. I converted like 17 years ago now. Yeah. So I did all my apologetics reading with a whole nother generation of apologists.
Right. Read the Imitations of Christ. I feel like it's one of those really important ones that people start off with reading. Just like the classics, really, just to
So,
start out with.
so modern apologists, check out Edward Fazer in his writings on Aquinas. I'm also going to
Mhm.
put in a plug for Peter Kraft, who is
Yes.
just fantastic. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting him back a few years ago, and one, he's a great guy. Two, uh, he's an easy guy to listen to. His lectures are amazing.
Mhm.
Just go find for anyone who's interested, go find them online. They're interesting in and of themselves, and he's
Yes.
a very engaging speaker, regardless. Even if you don't agree with him, he's a great speaker. Um, and I can't recommend it. Back to Kraft, his dialogues are amazing. I don't know if I've ever read any author who was able to convey complex ideas through dialogues better than him,
Right.
with the
And for those who
possible
hate
exception of
reading,
Plato.
yeah, exactly. And he's a good one for those who hate reading too, because they can find a lot of his lecture series on YouTube, which is great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's just phenomenal. What honestly one of the best out there. And he's also a convert, as luck would have it, although he came over from Protestantism. And let's see here. Go read Chesterton. Absolutely. If you haven't read Chesterton, what are you doing with your life? So
Yeah,
read
you're
him.
missing something.
Yeah, and also read. Well, you mentioned Balak. Definitely
Yes.
read Balak, and Chesterton and Balak were friends, incidentally, and just yeah. If you find anything with the name Hilaire Belloc attached to it or the name G.K. Chesterton, buy it and read it. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. And what are anything specific for those who anything specific for those who are interested in Islam, or any comparisons between the two that you might be aware of?
Um, hmm. Now this is just really sticky territory because you don't want people
Obviously,
to
yeah,
fall off the deep end, but
right.
St. John Chrysostom does a lot of apologetics towards them. Um, yeah, he's the go-to for that. The Desert Fathers, of course. Yeah.
The Desert Fathers. That is an excellent recommendation. So St. John Chrysostom, the Desert Fathers, and of course you can find these things normally for free online.
Right.
Um, in fact, I think you can find Chrysostom even on like the Gutenberg project, as luck would have it. The
Yeah,
Desert
actually.
Fathers in general, I don't know, but
Mhm.
Chrysostom, yeah. In fact, I think you might even find some Belloc and Chesterton there, and definitely some Aquinas. If you really want to get into the super dense stuff, you can just jump right into Aquinas, but
Yeah.
make sure you're ready for it. That's all I'm going to
Yeah.
say. Make sure you're ready for Aquinas. Like, put it this way: if you've ever tried reading Plato and you're like, "What?" You're going to have to work up to it.
Yeah. And have a couple mugs of coffee next to you if you want to start that.
Yes, yes, yes. For the forgive me if I'm mispronouncing, Joel. I'm just talking about different recommendations and everything for people to go and read. That's all I'm talking about. Um, well, I think we're about there. Amina, thank you very much for coming on. You have just a very interesting story, and I know we were only kind of skimming along the surface of it, but it's amazing. You have an incredible amount of courage, and I can't wait to see whatever you wind up being involved with, whatever direction you wind up going. I hope that somehow or another I get to see it in some way, shape, or form. So,
Thank you.
everybody in the chat, thank you so much for coming. It's been a very lively chat over there. I've enjoyed kind of keeping an eye on it. Please come back again some other time. We talk about all kinds of different things here on Fighting the Void. Sometimes it's really heavy stuff like this. Sometimes it's sometimes it's just pop culture. We're talking about movies or whatever. We get into politics a lot. So if you like a variety, come on over. If you dislike something specific, well, you can still throw the notifications on, and then you'll be able to say, nope, don't care about that one, don't care about that one. Oh, hey, that looks like fun. So anyway, again, Amina, thank you very much for coming on.
It was a pleasure being here. Thanks for inviting me, Ginger.
Absolutely. And actually, I hope to have you on again at some point in the future, and we can just go in depth on something else, or even just have you on as a general guest to talk about something other than yourself.
Great.
All right. Well, hey, again, thank you everyone for coming on, and we're going to plan on being back next week with another episode with another guest as we continue fighting the void. And until then,